Hi, Dee Clayton here from Simply Amazing Training. I'm not doing carpool karaoke. I wanted to just talk about a client that I have been working with this morning before we set off for our next location. We were talking about taking it in turns to speak in a conversation, so conversational turn taking as we call it, which is a great technique for people to use, which means that the introverted preferences in the group will get more of a chance to have their voices heard. They feel safer to speak up, and it gives extroverts a chance to allow some space to listen to introverted colleagues. Obviously I'm generalizing introverted, extroverted, but generally extroverts tend to talk in a group and speak up quickly and want to talk first, and what that does is often makes introverted preferences feel that they, in order to get their voice heard, they have to kind of interrupt, which they feel is rude, whereas extroverts are quite happy interrupting each other normally and don't think it's particularly rude. But what then tends to happen over time is that due to various things, groupthink and the introverted extroverted preference, mostly the extroverted ideas get taken on board and processed, and maybe introverts don't either get their voices heard or don't get their ideas taken as seriously. Even though they might have said them, they haven't said them repeatedly, which means they might not have been heard by extroverted preferences who might sometimes repeat the same idea. So what do you do? Conversational turn taking is a way of agreeing beforehand and keeping it consistent as to who will speak in a meeting. So let's say you've got a senior team working together. You would put the most senior person at the end on most occasions, especially if they're extroverted preference. So most senior person speaks last. And this is in the concept when you're trying to get opinions on something. So maybe somebody's presented their project, for example, and if you're then going around the room wanting opinions on things, the most senior person would speak last, all other things being equal. And then you'd work backwards to from sort of extroverted. So then in the middle would be the kind of introvert-extrovert balance, and you'd have introverted speak earlier on in the conversational turn-taking order. Now what you don't want though is you don't want somebody who's really high introverted preference speaking first, because this doesn't give them enough time to think about what they want to say and to think about the question. So you'd want to start with somebody who's more of an ambivert, i.e. introverted and extroverted, or can tap into either, who doesn't normally take over conversations but is quite happy to speak up. Especially if they go first, then they can feel quite comfortable speaking off the cuff or without too much preparation. Then you'd probably go into sort of somewhat introverted preferences, then more and more introverted, and then you go over to the slightly extroverted to the more extroverted, and then senior. Again, other things that might impact this order would be seniority, maybe experience. So if somebody's had 15 years experience, they might be seen as more influential, so they might need to go more towards the end. Newer people in the team might need to be more towards the beginning or middle, because they might not have enough experience to speak straight away. So just consider and decide with the team where people go, and you can just test it out. So give it a test drive, as I like to call it, as we are now driving. So give it a test drive, see if it works, and change and improve things using the feedback sandwich, which is a different technique that you'll hear me talking about. But using a feedback sandwich, get feedback on whether that works for the team and implement that as soon as possible in your meetings. What you can do, of course, is you can decide and be really clear with people when you're going to use this approach. So if you want to brainstorm, that's fine. You wouldn't necessarily do it in this order. If it's a daily stand-up meeting, you might do it in this order, you might not. So there might be some meetings that are more relevant than others, and just talk to the team, decide when it would be most useful, and implement that and give it a go, and then continue to improve. Hope that's been a useful tip, and if you want to have more tips, then do follow me on LinkedIn if you're not already. Bye.